Did they finally fix the overheating issue that's been plaguing these cameras since launch? I think they did. Plus, they've added a number of new features, which I think a lot of you are going to enjoy. Let's talk about it. Before we jump into the overheating though, because I know that's what a lot of you want to know, let's talk about some of the other enhancements on the S1 II and S1 II respectively. Now, the S1 II that I have in my hands, the max burst mode, or frames per second, is 40 frames. Now, we don't always need that. The buffer fills up very quickly. Now, you have the option of going at 20 frames per second, which is going to give you a little bit more room on your buffer. And on the S1 II, which goes up to 70 frames per second, you can now do 30 frames per second instead of just going right up to the max, because that's, again, going to help you with the buffer as well. So that's a very welcomed addition. Also, autofocus. Now, the autofocus on the S1 II, S1 II, S1 IIe has been good for me. I've had no issues with it whatsoever. But there's always been this complaint about this grid shape around the person and the subject, and it's not easy to understand where it's focusing on at times. Now, Lumix has given you the option of giving you the box around the eye, around the face, respectively. And also, they've enhanced the autofocusing. Now, I can tell you this. I've got a black dog. She's a Rottweiler, right? And, you know, tracking animals with black fur on the eye isn't that easy. Only 1 or 2 cameras that I've used thus far have been able to do it really well. Lumix is now in that camp. It tracks my dog's eye very, very good. So whatever Lumix is doing with their autofocusing system, hats off to them, because it is definitely an improvement. Now, you don't have the option that a lot of you have been wanting, is to have it so it detects whatever subject it is, animal, plane, train, person, bird, just automatically detects it, one setting for all. They don't have that yet. But again, as I mentioned in my S1 II video, I'm not a big fan of that, because it does take a while for the camera system to detect the subject and acquire focus. There is a delay. Even on the Sony A9 III, A1 II, Nikon Z8, Z9, there is a little bit of a delay, so I'm not really worried about that, but the autofocus definitely has improved quite a bit. But tracking, a little bit better, but not at the level that other systems are at right now. I hear Lumix is working on that, and we may see more firmware updates in the future to address that, but the autofocusing is definitely better. So let's talk about ISO performance, because there are some enhancements here. Now, before we had to go back to auto ISO, you were, let's say you're in manual mode, you had to scroll all the way to the end. Not anymore. Now you can set a function button or a dial, and by one press and one click, you could actually go right back to auto ISO. It makes it very easy to go back and forth if you need to. What about dual native ISO? Now, obviously, we know these cameras have fantastic dual native ISO capabilities. When you set it to auto, right, you're gonna actually see the dual native ISO settings in the auto ISO, and this color-coded. So blue is for the lower number, and red is for the higher number. So this is gonna make it much easier for you to see where you're at on the ISO range. Again, it's a visual cue, but it definitely helps out a lot, and definitely makes understanding a little bit more easier, especially for people that are newer to the dual native ISO system. Also, in terms of video, we got some enhancements as well. When it comes to anamorphic, you now have a 1.6 squeeze factor inside of this. Previously, it was 1.5, then you would jump up. Now you're at 1.6 if you want that option. And we also have MP4 Lite in open gates, which is very cool. Not many of you that I know will shoot an MP4 Lite, but if you need something quick for social media, you don't want a large file size, but you still want to shoot an open gate, you now can do that in MP4 Lite. And last but not least, we have an update to the LUMIX Flow app. So now your S5 II, S5 IIX, GH7 are now supported within the LUMIX Flow app. That's nice as supporting older cameras. Hats off to Lumix for doing that. It's a great app for monitoring and storyboarding. There's a lot of things you can do with this app. So I'm glad that they added those cameras into it. But overall, this is a very big update from Lumix, because the overheating factor has been a big concern for a lot of people investing into the system, and I understand it. Yes, I'm lucky to test a lot of these cameras, but I understand people's concern about dropping thousands of dollars and not being able to use it for various different workflows. All right, guys, let's talk overheating for a second here. I'm back on the computer for a minute, looking at some of the footage and the timings, and while I've only had the firmware for a few days, I've been testing all the cameras here. I can say you're definitely getting a 50% increase in terms of time before anything happens. Now, we're in monsoon season here in Singapore. It's rainy, it's overcast, cloudy, sometimes it's hot. I've only had the firmware for a few days, so I haven't been able to do a very rigorous test, but based on testing all 3 cameras, definitely about 50% better. And I would say that if you're worried about this at all, use SD cards. You're gonna get much better performance out of SD cards versus CF Express Type B cards because of the construction. The CF Express cards usually have metal on them, and that will, of course, increase the heat inside the camera system, where SD cards are plastic. That's one factor. But it was the thermostat that was causing the issue. From what I understand, this thermostat was highly sensitive as it was set inside the camera. So as it was reading outdoor temperatures, if they noticed a sudden increase, it would shut off the camera to protect itself, as it would. But it was overly sensitive. So Lumix has addressed that. They've toned it down. It's definitely easier to use. And I can say I've been recording some YouTube videos over the past couple of days with them, and I've had no issues in terms of overheating. The S1 IIe is fine. The S1 II had one issue with me, not recently, but before this firmware update, where it was in direct sun and it did overheat. The S1 II was the biggest culprit, but I think I can safely recommend these cameras for people out there. All right, guys, so just to give you an idea here, it is warm to the touch. Definitely feel the warmth here, but we're at 25 minutes and still no overheating. We're not in bright daylight. It is warm outside here today in Singapore, but it's not bright daylight. As you can see, it's more of a kind of, the sun is going down a little bit here, so it's still holding on strong, I have to say. Those are my tests, and with that, let's get back to the video. I think Lumix has addressed it, and they explained why this happened. Overall, I think we're gonna see a lot better performance. Now, the S1 II will never be unlimited recording, okay? But the S1 II, S1 IIe, which I never really had a problem with, the S1 II is definitely a lot better. Anyway, guys, if you like this video, like, subscribe. Thank you for the support, greatly appreciate it. And I'll chat to you all very, very soon.